Hello everyone and welcome to our April webinar, Intro to User Experience Design, Rethinking the Design Process. Today I'm happy to introduce you to one of the Cardinal Path UX team members, also a major force in the Cardinal Path Design team, Mike Jones. Mike is based out of our Phoenix office where he works closely with both the internal teams and with clients to assure striking and, more importantly, effective design. For those of you who haven't attended a Cardinal Path webinar yet, though looking through the attendee list, it looks like most of you have. My name's Kent, and I'll be sitting in on this presentation and taking any questions asked in the GoToMeetings question pane in the overall GoToMeeting panel. Then at the end of this webinar, I'll feed these back to Mike, and we'll see if we can answer as many of them as we can. So without further ado, Mike, take this away.
Hi everybody, this is Mike Jones. We'll be doing an Intro to User Experience Design webinar this morning. Hopefully you guys find it helpful and engaging. Real quick, just a couple things about me. As Ken already mentioned, I'm a UX and user interface designer here at Cardinal Path. Those are some of my contact handles. If you want to reach out to me after the webinar, that'd be awesome. Answer any further questions that you guys might have, and there'll be another slide at the end so you guys can get that info. So we'll jump right in. Three main things that we're going to cover today are what is user experience, or UX, and why should we care? Secondly is websites and UX, so how does user experience deal with websites and website design? And finally, breaking down UX into 5 planes. We'll get into that in a little bit. We'll start with what is user experience, or UX. As you'll see in the industry, UX is generally the term or the acronym that you'll see the most for user experience. So what is user experience? Seems like everybody's throwing this word around right now. I see it all over blogs, and not just design blogs, but also blogs centered around business and startups, centered around big companies like Apple. Apple's been a huge force in bringing user experience to the forefront of business. But what is it? What the heck is this term that people are throwing around? I thought a good place to start is the all-knowing Wikipedia, because they're the source of everything useful. But actually, in this case, it's pretty relevant. I thought their explanation, the little synopsis of user experience is really helpful. Basically, they said user experience, or UX, is the way a person feels about using a product, system, or service. I think that sums it up pretty well. So basically, what we want to say user experience is UX equals feelings. How people feel about using whatever it is that you're putting in front of them. So let's break this down just a little bit before we jump into the design of UX. I really want to make sure that we understand user experience and what goes into that. First up is, let's break down a user. Ultimately, a user is a person. So it's a real human being. They have dreams, they have goals, they have thoughts and desires. And ultimately, when they use something, they're generally doing it with something in mind that they want to accomplish at the end of it. Whether that's a product or a website or some service that you provide that has a user at some level. And these users are people, so they're emotional, they have feelings. And ultimately, it's these feelings about your product that become the user experience. Every day we make decisions based on how we feel. So the decisions that people make about your product, or the final conclusion that they make about your website, are generally based on what they feel and not so much based on what we like to think of as very logical steps of did they accomplish exactly what they were looking to do. That's a big part of it, but ultimately it's feelings and emotions that build that user experience. And finally, it's about experience. It's about using something. And ultimately, it's about accomplishing a goal. So when we talk about users who have feelings when they're using something like your product or your service, ultimately, they're trying to accomplish something at the end of that. So, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Great example is making a phone call and make a reservation at a restaurant. So the user in this case is someone making a phone call. And ultimately their goal or their desire is to book a reservation. But there's a lot of things that go into that experience, such as the phone that they're using or how the person answers the call on the other end. And then that whole conversation and that experience with that other person all comes together and builds a user experience, all in the blink of 5 minutes at the most. Another example might be a day trader, someone who trades stock all day. A lot of these people do that online, and they're using a system that's built. They're using a product that's built for doing just that. And they're using it all day, so 8, 10, maybe even 16 hours a day. They're sitting in front of a computer trading stocks. What kind of user experience are they building over that 8, 10, 16-hour block of time? That's a lot of time to be using a system or a product. And so over the course of that amount of time, they're building up a lot of emotion about it. Either they're building a lot of positive emotion or they're building a lot of negative emotion as they continue to run into frustrations or hiccups or things that they just don't really like. So I wanted to kind of give a little example of user experience in a little story. So this is a story of getting a flat tire. So we're going to put yourself in in someone else's shoes for just a moment. So pretend that you have a big presentation at work and you really want to wow your boss and the client. And so you get up early, you get ready, you jump in the car. In this case, you have a car and you're going to drive to work, so you're not mass commuting and saving the environment and all that fun stuff. So you're going to hop in your car and drive to work. And on your way there, you get a flat tire. And the great thing about getting a flat tire this day is you've never changed a flat tire in your life. So you've never done it before, don't really know how it works. Maybe you understand a little bit of the gist, but for the most part, you're pretty clueless. So you do what everybody does. You grab the owner's manual, right? And you open it up and you find the index and you look up how to change my tire. And of course, there's some instructions in there about where to put the jack and how to do it. So you grab everything out of the trunk and you get that jack set up and do everything. And as you're jacking the car up, it doesn't work. And the car actually falls, and it falls on the jack weird, and it breaks something. And next thing you know, you're sitting for 3 hours on the side of the road waiting for a tow truck. He's got to tow your car. You find out you've got hundreds of dollars in repair. You've lost all this time. You missed your big presentation, and you're really frustrated. All because the owner's manual told you to do something that wasn't right for that car. So what do? Well, you're obviously really, really frustrated and angry, and you pretty much make a decision you're never going to buy a car of that brand ever again. And don't use the Honda example in the picture as gospel here. I'm a huge Honda fan, so I'm not saying this happened to me or this is a problem with Hondas. It was an easy image to grab. But not only are you frustrated about the brands, but you also go and tell all of your friends about your horrible experience that you had. And you tell them about how when you opened up the owner's manual, it told you one thing and it totally didn't work. And even though you were inexperienced and you'd never changed a tire before, you expected that owner's manual to tell you what to do. And you expected it to tell you what to do in a way that would protect your car. And not only did you tell all your friends, but you decided to go online and go to a couple forums, go to a couple review sites, and write some pretty nasty words. So this is a great example of a negative user experience. In this long story, at the end of the day, the user is you, the person who's trying to get to work on time. And you've got a big presentation, so there's a lot of emotion involved. And at the end of the day, the product, you felt like the product failed you. And regardless of the reasons of why the product failed you, in your mind it did. And so when we talk about users, we want to make sure that we're always looking through their lens of their eyes and what they see, how they're interacting with your product, your service, or your website. So that's a negative example. Probably good to have a positive example just to make sure that we're balancing everything out. This is actually a personal story. moocards.com, I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's a great little site. Basically, they sell business cards. Have a couple other products, but primarily business cards. So a couple years ago, I got an offer to come to moocards.com and get some free business cards. And I'd never really heard of them before and thought, well, I might as well check it out. So I come to the site. It's really nice, clean, easy to see what's going on and find what I'm looking for. I find the business cards in the drop-down menu, and I head over to it and start looking at the product and what they offer and what's different about it than another online print shop. And find out that I can customize my design. I can even upload a bunch of my own photography or my own images, and it'll randomly print them on the back of the cards in like a random order. And I was like, that's really cool. That's a nice little extra that I wasn't expecting when I got there. So I go ahead and I'm like, well, it's free, so I might as well do it. I'll get 50 free business cards. And so I go through the order, and it's real easy, and I upload my photos. That's real easy, and I get to the order form, and I can check out, I can pay with a credit card, input my shipping information, and off it goes. And about 30 minutes later, I get an auto email, as expected, to confirm that my order went through. And what was cool and what I wasn't expecting was that actually came from an email address that they had set up called Little Moo, the print robot. So they created this little character who sent out all their automated emails that provided some personality to this very automated, mechanical, robotic, auto email type system. Something that I think most humans kind of go, ugh, another auto email. I know this is just from their system. It's not even a real person on the other end. And they went, you're right, it's not. So we're going to make a little character to pretend like there's some identity behind it. That was pretty cool. I like that. And then when I finally got the product, and you'll see there's a little image there. That's not the final product I got, but that was one I grabbed online. Same exact experience, though. I got this cool little box with this nicely wrapped outer design thing. And then inside it said, yay, you're a new best friend. So here's a little congratulations for a new customer relationship that they have with me. They're excited. I'm kind of excited. I check it out. The cards look great. They feel great. The product is really nice. So overall, I had a really great experience. And that actually led to me continuing to order business cards from them for like the next couple years. I still got a bunch of them sitting at home, and I still hand them out. So here's a great example of a positive user experience, specifically with a website. Now, all these little touch points that we have with the user, in this case, moocards.com is thinking about not just the design, not just the copy, but what are those little things that they can do to add a little personality, to add a little bit extra to create this great, wonderful, exciting, fun user experience. So why should we care about user experience? I think we kind of already know, but I'll say it anyway. User experience builds brand loyalty if you do it well. If you have users who are having great experiences on your website or with your product, they're going to want to continue to come back. They're going to want to tell other people about it. And most of the time, they're going to continue to be a great customer of yours. And that's exactly what you want. That's business done well. When we have returning customers, when we have people who want to continue to use our products, that's a great sign that we're doing things well and that we have a healthy business. We're providing something very useful. Throwing up a couple logos just because I can. Obviously, Apple's a big one. They've really defined user experience as a core part of everything that they do, from every little touch point of their product. Steve Jobs always had a great saying about user experience is not just the design, it's how that product is actually built. So they incorporate user experience principles all the way down into the engineering and manufacturing of their products. And you got Nike, another great example of a user experience-centered company. I highly encourage you guys to go and check out some of the little apps, and they've got some great apps for iPhone and Android for athletics and running. Lots of really cool stuff going on over at Nike. And then Mini Cooper, this is kind of an interesting niche brand. I know most people don't own a Mini, don't probably see a Mini Cooper a lot of times, but we've got some good friends who are involved in the Mini Cooper kind of realm of users, customers, and they've built a really, really great brand loyalty with their products. And a lot of it comes down to the user experience of not only their cars, but how they sell their cars, and that whole process of going and checking it out, ordering your car, customizing it, tons of options. I highly recommend checking them out, following them to kind of see more of how a business thinks about user experience through the whole process of a product. So moving on, we want to talk specifically today about websites and user experience. So we kind of got the big general, what is user experience? And we saw some examples of how that works with the product. We really want to nail down what are we talking about with websites. Ultimately, most of us work in the web industry, or we run sites, or we have clients who run sites, and this is where we really need to be on our game when it comes to user experience. So websites and UX. Websites are not just text anymore. They're really becoming applications, and anyone who's worked with anyone who has run a site that's sells product online is really starting to understand this. There's lots of sites out there that just provide content, but even in that, there's a lot of interactions with users, functionality that's becoming more and more application-like. And so because of this, we really need to start thinking more and more about user experience when we're designing or we're planning or we're building websites. So a great place to start is how do we break down the user experience of websites in particular? So users have lots of experiences with their websites, positive and negative. And a lot of them are affected by a whole bunch of different elements and different reasons why they have a positive or negative experience. I'm just going to list out a few, so bear with me. One great one that's always, I think, should be at the forefront of your mind when you're thinking about your website is, was a user able to accomplish what they came to do? There's a lot hidden in that little phrase, but were they able to accomplish what they came to do? And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Did they find what they were looking for? So when they came to the site, did they find what they were expecting to find? Did they find more than they originally were looking for in a good way? So maybe you provided more information or more features or more options than they were expecting, and they found that really helpful. Did they find what they were looking for easily? Was it easy to find? Or was it at least easier than other sites or products that they've used? Or was it really hard to find? Or maybe the process of getting what they wanted was really long and laborious. They felt like, oh man, that was way too many steps for what I was trying to accomplish. Was your site a new experience for them? And this can be both positive and negative. Sometimes people might enjoy a new experience. Or others might be like, that was too different for me. That was outside of the box, and I didn't really understand what was going on. This is where really understanding who your users are and what they like is great for understanding how to build a website that really caters to them. Maybe you've designed and built a website that's pleasantly familiar and comfortable. Maybe it's really easy for them because it feels like they've been here before, even if they've never been there. They know exactly what they're looking for, how to find it. Things make sense. Does your site stand out from other sites that these users have been to? So a great thing to be thinking about is, does your site differentiate? Are there tons of other sites that look and feel and act and have the same exact thing that your site has, and the user comes to yours and they go, well, I'm not really sure if I'm where I'm supposed to be, or this really isn't any different than that other site that I always use, so why should I continue using this one? And there's a whole bunch more of these, and actually I've got a whole bunch more, and maybe sometime I'll throw these into a blog post and we can continue the conversation on that. But for the sake of time, I'm gonna move on. So how can we provide user experiences that are both effective and delightful when there's so many elements involved in the user experience? I think a great place to start is to break down the user experience of a website into bigger chunks, or as we're going to call them today, planes of UX, the 5 planes of UX. And these are strategy, scope, structure, skeleton, and surface. And I'll be flat out with you guys. I did not come up with these names or the structure. Totally ripped this from another guy, Jesse James Garrett. He wrote a book called The Elements of User Experience, and I highly recommend you check that out if you get a chance. He wrote this book back in 2000, and he's got some great insights into how to break down UX. And he breaks down UX into these 5 components: strategy, scope, structure, skeleton, and surface. And today I'm going to kind of break those down a little bit further, give us a little bit more information about them, and hopefully make it all make sense. So some important points as we're talking about these. And as you see in the little diagram, again, ripped right from his book. And I promise I'm not ripping everything from his book, because there's plenty of original content in here. But I thought this diagram was too good. Strategy is at the bottom. It's really the foundation of everything you do, and then you build on that from there. And because of that, you can't skip around and leave stuff out. It just doesn't work that way. It's really important that you start with strategy and you move your way upwards all the way through to surface. And these are also going to move from abstract to concrete. So when you're working through the strategy plane, you're probably going to feel a little bit out of your element if you're not used to working in abstract thought. But know that as you continue to work up that chain, start building on strategy, building on scope, building on structure, things are going to become more and more solid. You're going to feel like your ideas are more concrete as you move up, and that's a good thing. The abstract thought that you start with in the strategy plane is really important for defining and creating really concrete designs and user experiences that make sense. That said, each of these planes is going to overlap a little bit into the next. It's not like you're going to finish strategy and completely wrap it up, tie a little bow on it, and then move on to scope. The reality is, as you work through strategy, you're going to begin to creep into scope. As you work through scope, you're going to creep into structure, and that's great. Each of these has a little bit of fluidity to it, and that's great. So let's break these down. First up is strategy. So what do we mean when we say strategy? This word gets tossed around a lot. I see it everywhere. And it really just means, what's the goal? What's the purpose? What's the big why for your website? And this is where it's really important that we start with users. What are maybe the 1, 2, or 3 core things that your users want to get out of your site? What is the desire or goal that they're trying to accomplish that your site is going to meet for them? And in turn, what are the 1, 2, or maybe 3 things that you and your business want your site to accomplish? So what do users want, and what do you want? Hopefully, at the end of the day, what they want and what you want match up. So great example, and we'll actually look a little bit more at Amazon in a little bit, but Amazon sells books. So ultimately, their big why, their big goal, their big purpose is to sell books. So hopefully their users want to buy books. So if we flip that around and we say, my users want to buy books and I want to sell books, that sounds like a great match. And that sounds like you have a great start to a successful website. So what does strategy do? Ultimately, it provides focus and foundation. It's going to inform every decision you make after it. So in all those other planes that follow, your strategy is what you're always going to be coming back to and saying, does this meet that end goal of our users? Does this meet that end goal of our business? And hopefully those 2 things match up. If they don't, you probably need to rethink things. If your users want something that your site's not providing, you either need to change what your site's providing, the big why, the big goal, or you might need to find different users. So that's part of that whole strategy, is really figuring out who your users are, the big why, and focusing on all of that. So let's move into scope. We're going through these quickly. Hopefully there'll be some more opportunities in the future to really delve deeper into these 5 planes of UX. There's a lot to unpack in each of these. But for now, we're just going to do quick overviews. So moving on to scope. Simply put, this is the list of things users should be able to accomplish on your site. So all the tasks or all the user stories. what are all those little things that get the user to the final goal of what they really want out of your site. So buying books is a great example. What are all those things that are going to lead up to them buying books? What are the extra things that you might want to tack on to that to provide for what your business needs out of it? Hopefully selling more books. So a great example, talking about books, let's talk about Amazon. So strategic goal, we already talked about this. Amazon's probably their big strategic goal, I'm guessing here because I don't actually work for Amazon, but I'm pretty sure this is one of them, is to satisfy users' desire to buy books. So what are all the ways that they're going to do this? Well, here's a short little user story to kind of give you an example. So users can search for books and be provided best matches of books based on their search keywords. That makes sense. You know, I want to buy a book, I got to find the book first. So let's give them a way to find it. They'll be able to search by author, title, ISBN, maybe some other things. That's all part of that task. And then as Amazon.com, we're going to provide some extra information about the book when they find it. So maybe they'll be able to view the cover artwork, maybe read some reviews, see a synopsis. And actually, if you check out Amazon.com, I'm sure you all have been there, and you click on any product, but especially books, there's tons of extra information that they provide. So they've really built out that task, really said we want to make sure that our users have a lot of different options of content to be engaged with when they find the book that they're looking for. And then moving on, they can save them to a cart for later purchasing. So they can continue to search and add books to their cart. That's a great user task. And then they might even be able to see related books when you kind of have to go, well, how are they related? Like, how do we determine what other books to show them based on something that they've already looked at or that they've already put in their shopping cart? Well, maybe it's based on all the other users on our site. So as Amazon.com, they're tracking what people are looking at, what people are putting in their shopping carts, and they're saying, hey, you just looked at this book. Why don't you check out some of these other books that a lot of our other users have been looking at who've also looked at the book that you saw? It's a great example of adding an extra feature, an extra task that a user might find really helpful in the process of buying a book. And then moving on from there, obviously being able to check out, pay with a credit card, and get an estimate for shipping. Those are all additional user stories or user tasks that can all be part of that long string of that user going from, I've come to your site, and now I'm going to accomplish the goal that I came to do. That's all part of that big scope. Sorry, there we go. So the next one is structure. So we've talked about strategy, talked about scope. Now we're getting a little bit finer. We're going to talk about the structure of our site. What do we mean by structure? Well, you kind of need a plan for how those users are going to flow through your site. So ultimately, structure is talking about the flow of your site. So as a user, how do I find what I'm looking for? What's the flow of actions or interactions that I'm going to take on the site? Great way to visualize this is mind maps or flowcharts. A couple examples here. The one on the left is more of a content-oriented site. So there's not a lot of, everything's pretty much a static screen for the most part, just content on pages. So we want to organize that in a way that makes a lot of sense. Maybe provide some categories for different sections. How are those categories related to one another? And a mind map or some kind of chart like that really makes that very easy to visualize and really helps as you continue to move through the 5 planes of user experience. The one on the right is more of a flow chart, so it's kind of what are the interactions that a user are going to take. So they might click on the curiosity button, and then they have some options, and then they have more options that they can choose from, and then what's going to be provided if they click yes versus if they click no. Kind of just the whole flow of your site or the different functionalities within your site. Doesn't really matter what you end up using or what tool you use. The more important thing is that you're really thinking these things through in a very logical manner, and that you're thinking through as much detail as you possibly can. You can spend a lot of time on the scope, the structure phase, and that's really important. It's really important to solidify these things before you move on to the next planes of user experience. The next one being skeleton. So we've figured out the strategy, figured out the big why, the big goal, and we figured out the scope, we figured out what are all the functionality that we're going to allow our users to have, and we've kind of figured out a flow of our site. And so the next thing is the first kind of visual element of our site, and that's wireframes. It's like the layouts of sites. What are all the elements that are going to go on each of these pages or each of these views that the user is going to see? What images are they going to see? What copy are they going to see? Where is the button going to go? Is there going to be a call to action? Where is that going to go? Great way to visualize this is with wireframes. This can be as simple as a little sketch in a sketchbook. Actually use those a lot. They're really nice for just really quick and dirty explanations of how a user is going to see and visualize the site, where things are going to go, how we communicate effectively. The one on the right is a little bit more fleshed out. It's got, obviously it's been rendered in some kind of computer graphics program. You can still tell that it's not focused on the aesthetics of the site, but it's focused on just layout. Where are things going to go? What's going to have the most emphasis, things that are dark, versus what's going to have less emphasis, things that are light. What content is going to be on the site? Ultimately, the skeleton stage is all about creating kind of a package from which you can build out the skin or the visual aesthetics of your site. And it also ensures that you're creating a site that communicates really well, that things are clearly defined where they're going to be, so that the user has a very logical and pleasant experience as they work through your site. And that leads us to the last plane of user experience, and that's surface. Basically, surface is the interface. It's the visual elements, it's the copywriting, it's the eye candy that the user is going to experience as they are on your site. I kind of like to think of it as the packaging of your site, if your site were a product. As they play with your site, they're going to open it up, they're going to play with the packaging, and even beyond that, they're going to actually play with your product. Your website is your product, and they're going to touch it, they're going to feel it. So it's really important to be thinking through, like, your copywriting on your site. Is it engaging? Does it really speak to the user? This is where it's really important to understand who your users are. People communicate in different ways. Great example, really simple one. I think we would all be like, oh, duh, that's an easy one, but do your users speak English or do they speak Spanish? If they primarily speak English, it's probably a good idea to have your site in English. And if they primarily speak Spanish, then probably a good idea to have a site that's built with Spanish, or at least give them the option to switch back and forth, because maybe your users are multilingual. But it could be even more specific than that. You could be looking at users who maybe they're an older generation. And so if you throw around a bunch of like slang terms that are really catchy with people in their teens, then you might have a hard time engaging people of an older generation who don't really understand what you mean, or find maybe that slang term is maybe a little offensive, or maybe it just doesn't resonate with them. Same thing with a lot of business sites that I see. A lot of them write copy that's industry related. So they'll use catchy industry related terms, or they'll use an abbreviation that's familiar within their industry. And that's great if you're talking to your competitors, but a lot of times businesses are not talking to people or familiar with all the industry jargon within your industry. And so they might find that actually kind of off-putting, like, man, you're using all these words and I have no idea what they mean. And not only do I not know what they mean, but you haven't really given me any way to figure out what they mean. So no definitions. So if you are going to use industry jargon like that, great idea is to at least provide some explanation. Don't assume that your user understands all the terminology and vocabulary that you would normally use in your everyday life. Again, all comes back to the user. Who's your user? How do you build an experience that really resonates with them? Moving on from copy, you can also talk about design. And that's going to be everything from typography, like what fonts do you use? Is it going to be big or small? Are you going to use bold or italic to emphasize certain things? Building some typographical structure for your site. It's going to include what images. Maybe you have specific styles for your images. I love this example on the right. I think this is, to be honest, I don't even remember what site this was. Oh, it's the eyeglasses. Yeah, so their product is eyeglasses. They're trying to sell eyeglasses. And they've created a really cool structure of typography, so they have some interesting fonts that they're using. And but beyond that, they've really gone to the next step, and they've said, you know what? Let's have photography that's all done in the same style. And it's an engaging style. You can kind of see there's kind of this kind of quirkiness, slight quirkiness to it. Like each of the models that they're using kind of have these quirky expressions. They've really built the brand into everything that they're doing with the design of their site, the aesthetics of their site, this interface that users are going to interact with. And even moving beyond just the static style of your site is even transitions, animations. What are those little interactions when someone clicks on something or they roll over something? Those are all part of the user experience. And while they might be really small and minor in our eyes, a lot of times users find those things really engaging and fun. And not only fun, but when you have buttons that feel like real things, people are probably more likely to click on them. When an interface has functionality that feels like I'm hitting a key on my keyboard, at least somewhatly, there's a connection there. People can go, oh, this feels like something I'm already familiar with. That makes sense that I get to click on it, and it looks like what would happen when I click a button like on my computer. Or I use the power button on this other device that I have. That makes a lot of sense to me. So lots of things to be thinking about in all of these different planes, as you can see. And I would love to dive into more detail on these in the future, so hopefully there'll be some more opportunities for that. So just a quick wrap up. What have we talked about today? First up, what is UX? It's the feelings our users come away with when using our product, specifically our website. So why does UX matter? Our users' feelings affect immensely the likelihood of making a purchase, continuing to use our product or our website again and again, and even if they'll recommend it to others. If people have great experiences, more likely than not, they'll find a way to share it. And that's great for our product. It means that we get to grow and build it. And it's also great for our business. Usually more users means a little bit more money in our pockets and the ability to continue to grow and expand as a business. And finally, talked about what is our user experience design framework. So we talked about, number one, it's strategy, which is the goal of our site or our product. We talked about scope, which is all the tasks that users can accomplish on our site. It's the structure, it's kind of that map of how things are going to work. It's the skeleton or the layout of our pages or our views. And finally, it's the surface, it's the interface. It's how it all looks and feels when the user interacts with it. Last slide I've got here is just some other resources that you guys can check out. And I'll make sure that we provide a link to a PDF download so you guys can click these links and check them out. Obviously, first off, Elements of User Experience. We already talked about this book by James Garrett. It's a great book to check out. There's even a free chapter you can download that talks about some of the stuff that we talked about today. You check that out there on the link. Another great book to check out, real short, real easy to digest. Great for anyone working within a company who's got a site where you want to be more user experience centered with the design and the build of that site. It's called the Undercover User Experience Design. I definitely recommend checking that out. Cardinal Path blog, of course. We've got lots of posts about UX as well as lots of other digital analytics and digital marketing topics on there. Definitely check that out. 52 Weeks of UX If you're looking for kind of a crash course on UX, this is a series of great essays and little brief thoughts that the writers have put together. These guys are UX industry professionals, and they built a site. And for 52 weeks, they posted once a week on there. There's some great stuff to learn. Won't take you very long to get through it either. They're pretty short, but very insightful. UX Mag or UX Magazine, it's got lots of great stories from the field of user experience, both study and design. So you get some research topics in there, as well as actual implementation of design and build. And across a whole bunch of different industries, you'll see everything from website designs and website builds all the way through like healthcare applications and software. It's a great example of how to see a lot of what's going on across multiple industries with user experience. Little big details. I love this site. It's just a little Tumblr blog. Basically, the author just posts little screenshots of small little user interface details that they find inspirational. If you're a designer or you work with a website, this is a great way to get some little inspiration on how you can make those little things that make your website stand out, that can make an experience just a little bit better for your users. And finally, 90% of everything. This is a fantastic blog by Harry Brignall. He's a senior UX designer at Clearleft over in England, which is a top UX design firm. He just blogs about anything and everything that comes to his mind as a UX designer, and it's brilliant. I definitely recommend checking that out. So finally, we'll wrap up with questions, and there's my contact information if you want to hit me up later today or whenever. But I'll hand this back over to Kent and see what questions you guys have.
Oddly, we seem to have no questions right now, Mike. Let's give everyone a minute or two to think things over and ask whatever they can.
Definitely.
A good question, and it's one for me, actually. Will the slides be available for download? Yes. I'm going to see if I can get these slides from Mike soon, and they'll be up on our blog in a new post either tomorrow or the next day, along with a recording of this webinar. I think that's it, Mike. Oh, wait.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
There's actually one last question just popped in here. What I'm going to guess the question is, what are your favorite strategies for testing user experience?
For testing user experience, it's a great question. A/B testing is always good if you're wanting to test just one-off type things like a call to action button. Multivariate is also a great way. You can test multiple options over time. There's a ton of different ways to do that. I highly recommend checking out a site called abtests.com. You'll see tons of examples of A/B tests and multivariate tests on landing pages and website designs. I also highly recommend focus testing. So getting a more subjective view from users of the experience that they're having on your site. You can do that as generally as just play with your site, give them maybe a few tasks to accomplish through it, and see how they do. Notice the touch points where they get hung up, and ask them to talk through it a lot. That's a great way to get just kind of down and dirty, what experience are users really having with your site. Data, doing an A/B test or doing a multivariate test with tons of people is a great way to test things, but a lot of times you'll get so narrowly focused on just one little element that you're trying to test that you don't see the bigger picture of, oh my goodness, this whole series of checkout pages just doesn't make sense to people. We had 10 different users go through it, and every one of them got hung up at somewhere in that process. And so focus testing is a great way to really for you to experience how your users are experiencing your site. So that's a great question. I'm sure there's more we can talk about. Hit me up if you've got more regarding testing.
One more here, and this I quite like this one. How do you overcome clients who say things like, I want it this way despite UX recommendations?
That is a great question. Well, first off, if you're starting with strategy, hopefully you are, and you and the client have come to an agreement on that strategy, you can always point them back to that and say, look, we're making decisions based on this goal, this main reason why this site exists. Let's make sure we're making decisions that make sense with that. Ultimately, you're going to run into stuff where, like, hey, the client wants a specific little thing or a specific desire on their part that you feel doesn't make sense. It's always going to happen. It's just the nature of human communications and just working with clients. Ultimately, I say, as a consultant, it's your job to tell them what you believe, to hopefully prove it with some experience or data to back it up. But at the end of the day, it's their site, it's their product, and it's their decision. So I would say let them know a couple times, hey, I really firmly believe that this is the right way to go. And if they continue to push back, then I say, you know what, all right, we'll go with your route. Great way to kind of justify yourself in this is start doing some testing once you launch. Say, hey, let's try it your way, but do you mind if we do an A/B test or some multivariate testing or some focus testing that focuses in on that specific user interaction to say, hey, maybe this actually doesn't work, and let's find out. Let's be sure. So, great question.
We'll give a minute here and see if any more roll in. Doesn't look like it. All right, I think we can wrap this up. Mike?
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, hit me up if you got any more questions, but otherwise, hopefully we'll be doing another webinar on UX soon and dig more into this stuff.
Goodbye, everyone.